So, imagine you're opening a wedding invitation. It's for like two 23-year-olds.
Okay.
But the card doesn't just say, John is marrying Jane. It boldly announces that Dr. John is marrying Dr. Jane.
Oh, wow.
Right. And you happen to know for a fact that neither of them has ever been anywhere near a medical school or a PhD program for that matter.
Not even close, yeah.
Exactly. Yet when you show up to the reception, you smile, you shake their hands, and you call them doctor anyway, just like everyone else in the room.
Because you just play
You
along.
play along. So, welcome to the deep dive. I'm thrilled to have you with us today as we explore a society where that exact scenario isn't just like a quirky anecdote. It's actually a symptom of a massive institutional crisis.
Yeah. We are looking at a brilliantly observed essay today. It's titled The Republic of Titles, Somalia's Epidemic of Empty Honorifics. And it details this really fascinating phenomenon where a society just entirely stops valuing actual verifiable competence.
And instead, they just start worshiping the label itself.
Exactly. They worship the label.
Well, our mission today for you, the listener, is to explore what happens when language just completely loses its meaning. We're going to dive into the psychology of status, the fragility of truth, and how people develop these bizarre coping mechanisms when the institutions around them collapse.
It's a heavy topic, but super interesting.
It really is. Okay, let's unpack this. What exactly does an epidemic of titles look like when you zoom in on the ground level?
Well, the source paints this remarkably vivid, almost surreal picture of public life in Somalia today. So picture a local political event, right? Or like a community gathering.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
A speaker approaches the podium to give an address. But before this person can utter a single word of policy or substance, the master of ceremonies introduces him with just a relentless barrage of honorifics.
Right, like he's not just introduced as a simple mister.
No, not at all.
The essay notes he's introduced as doctor, professor, sheikh, engineer, general, honorable so-and-so. Sometimes they literally stack all of those titles onto the same person at the exact same time.
It's incredible.
The author perfectly describes the visual of this, actually. He says, it's as though the poor man has been assembled from the spare parts of 5 professions.
That is such a great line. And what's fascinating here is the underlying sociological principle that's driving that exact visual.
Which is what, exactly?
Well, a society that inflates titles to this absurd degree is actually signaling a profound loss of confidence in substance. It's a direct reaction to a vacuum.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. When real, tangible authority is scarce, like
Yeah.
because institutions have failed or trust is low symbolic authority, just multiplies to fill the void.
If you're listening to this and thinking it's just a localized issue on the other side of the world, think about the modern corporate ecosystem.
Oh, absolutely.
It really reminds me of a real-life glitching LinkedIn profile. Or corporate America's obsession with giving everyone a vice president title just to appease their ego.
Right, exactly.
You see people checking every single box: medical expert, military strategist, thought leader, engineering guru, banking on the fact that nobody will ever click through to ask for the receipts. They just want to capture that algorithmic prestige.
Yeah, the human impulse is identical, even if the ecosystem is totally different. In the context of the essay, those titles are no longer descriptions of what a person has actually achieved through labor or study.
They're just decorations.
Purely decorative. The text actually calls them costumes of importance rather than certificates of competence. Nobody in the audience stands up to ask, which university this professor teaches at.
Or which hospital the doctor trained in.
Right. Or what specific army this general actually commanded.
But wait, let me push back on that for a second to really get at the mechanics of this.
Sure.
If these fakes are so incredibly obvious, if a guy in a suit is calling himself a doctor, professor, and general, and everyone in the room knows he runs a local grocery store, why does that actually harm the genuine professionals?
That's a good question.
Doesn't the fake just look foolish while the real doctor just goes about their business saving lives at the actual hospital?
It is a logical assumption to make, definitely,
Hmm?
but it ignores how the currency of language actually functions. The essay walks us through a very specific linguistic decay.
Okay.
At first, a title like doctor means something. It's a social contract. You hear it and you trust the person's expertise.
Right.
But then, as it gets adopted by unqualified politicians and local officials, the title begins to mean less. Over time, as the market floods with fakes, it means nothing.
Wow.
And the final tragic stage of this decay is that the title comes to mean the exact opposite of what it was designed to convey.
Wait, the opposite. Walk us through that final stage. How does a title become its own opposite?
Well, think about the cognitive steps happening in the mind of the public, right? The more frequently a dubious, clearly unqualified politician is introduced as doctor, the more suspicious the actual word becomes.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, the more a mediocre official is introduced as professor, the more the word professor begins to sound like a punchline.
So the genuine professionals actually pay the price.
Exactly. Eventually, the hardworking professional, the person who spent a decade doing night shifts at a real hospital, has to suffer the smirk that was produced by the imposter. The label itself is tainted by association.
Man, the hyperinflation destroys the currency. And the essay mentions this dynamic is especially grotesque in the political arena, where politics transforms into what the author calls a beauty contest of certificates.
That is where the practical danger really lies. You end up with an entire dense forest of public figures. Parliamentarians, ex-warlords, regional administrators.
And they all think they need these titles.
Right, they believe they absolutely must have academic embroidery to be viewed as legitimate. But a title doesn't do the work of governance. A medical degree, real or fake, does not write a functional budget or, reform a broken ministry.
The essay gave an incredibly sharp example of a chemistry lecturer. Even if someone is a legitimate chemistry lecturer and knows the periodic table flawlessly, that doesn't automatically mean they have a coherent view on national security.
Or constitutional reform, yeah.
Exactly. Yet, the public arena invites the audience to bow before the academic label rather than examine the politician's actual arguments or policies.
Because the title functions as a shield against scrutiny. That is its true utility for the politician. Doctor becomes a convenient, unquestionable substitute for actual policy.
Right.
Chic becomes a substitute for demonstrating real moral seriousness.
Sure.
It permits a person to completely avoid the hard work of explanation.
But, if these titles are so inflated that they sound like a joke, who is actually buying it? We have to look at the theater of this entire charade.
Yeah.
And the answer the essay gives is incredibly revealing. Nobody is fooled, yet everybody plays along.
Right. The public is highly perceptive. The text points out that this is perhaps the oddest, most contradictory aspect of the entire epidemic. Everyone knows exactly who is a fraud.
They know the title is just theater.
Completely.
Yeah.
In private spaces, in living rooms, and coffee shops, they laugh about it. They raise eyebrows. They ask each other, Where did this guy even study?
Yeah.
What has he ever built?
But the moment they step into the public square, they participate in the exact same ceremony.
They do.
They clap for the fake professor, they repeat the false title, they introduce the man solemnly, they print these absurd honorifics on campaign posters.
Which brings us back to that wild wedding invitation detail we started with.
Yes, the young couples putting Dr. X marrying Drs. Y on their invites.
Exactly. The title has completely escaped the university or the hospital. It's just a social ornament now, no different than the floral arches at the wedding venue.
Which raises an important question about the psychological toll of living in two distinct realities.
It does. The author describes the gap between private truth and public speech as morally exhausting. It creates this pervasive double consciousness across the entire society.
Well, double consciousness.
In private, people speak plainly and ridicule the fraud. But in public, they perform. They salute the general, who they know is just a relic of militia politics, because challenging him disrupts the social peace.
It sounds a lot like the story of the Emperor's New Clothes, but
Yeah.
with a massive cynical twist.
How do you mean?
Well, in the classic fairy tale, the crowd is tricked, or at least they doubt their own eyes until a child points out the truth, right?
Right.
But in this version, the emperor knows he's naked, the crowd knows he's naked, the tailor knows he's naked. But everyone just compliments the invisible fabric anyway because nobody wants to deal with the fallout of stating the obvious.
That is the perfect way to visualize it. And over generations, that dynamic teaches a society a very dangerous lesson.
Which is?
That language is not a tool for describing reality. It's a tool for managing danger. Words become instruments of social survival, not truth. The lie is not actually believed by anyone, but it is universally obeyed.
The lie is not believed, but it is obeyed.
Wow. Let's pause on that because it forces us to look at the root causes.
Yeah, the why.
Right. Why would an entire society trap itself in this exhausting, cynical theater? What are the mechanisms actually driving this epidemic?
The source outlines two major structural and emotional drivers. The first is clan competition.
Okay, unpack that. Well, in a highly functional, individualistic society, a person walking around with the completely fabricated title would just be ridiculed for their personal vanity, right?
Yeah, they'd be a laughingstock.
But in this specific context, personal titles are quickly converted into collective property.
Oh, so the social pressure is collective. So if Clan A suddenly produces a professor for a political seat, Clan B feels intense pressure to produce two.
Precisely. If one faction presents a doctor, the rival faction must produce a doctor of its own, and preferably one with a longer name and a more mysterious, hard-to-verify international qualification.
That's crazy to think about.
All these titles, academic, religious, military, they're dragged into the marketplace of clan prestige. And because of this, the clan itself becomes the accrediting body. Loyalty completely replaces verification.
I want to challenge the role of the media here, though, because the essay takes a pretty hard stance.
It does.
Like, why don't journalists just do their jobs? If someone gets up and says, I'm General Doctor Professor, the text suggests reporters just recite the decoration out of cowardice disguised as respect.
Right.
But is it actually cowardice? I mean, if challenging a warlord's fake title could trigger an online mob, or frame the journalist as attacking a rival clan, or even put them in physical danger, that sounds a lot more like basic survival than a lack of journalistic integrity.
That is a very fair distinction, actually, and it highlights how deeply the trap is set. The media in this environment behaves less like a watchdog and more like a wedding announcer, precisely because the stakes of asking a simple question are artificially inflated.
Right.
Once everything is viewed through a tribal prism, a basic factual inquiry like, where did you earn your doctorate, is no longer treated as a defense of academic standards. It's immediately weaponized.
So you aren't just asking for a syllabus, basically. You're accused of humiliating an entire lineage.
Yes. You're accused of jealousy or having a vendetta. So the journalist, calculating the risk, chooses the path of least resistance. They read the ridiculously long nameplate and move on.
Wow.
It is survival, yes, but the essay's point is that dressing up that survival as respect for the elder or the politician is a fatal compromise for a nation's truth.
So clan competition and social survival form the first major driver. But there has to be a personal hunger driving someone to accept a fake title in the first place, right? What is the second mechanism?
The second driver is deeply emotional, and it's rooted in trauma. It's the hunger for dignity.
The hunger for dignity.
Yeah, you have to remember the historical context of the society we're discussing. Generations of people have been denied stable forms of status due to war, displacement, severe poverty, and the total collapse of civic institutions.
So everything they knew was gone.
Exactly. In conditions where traditional paths to success are destroyed, symbolic status becomes incredibly intoxicating.
It offers a quick elevation.
Yeah.
A way to matter in a world that has, largely ignored you.
A title gives a person a larger shadow without requiring them to actually do anything extraordinary. It's an instant injection of dignity.
But there's a catch.
A big one. The tragedy, as the author points out, is that dignity obtained through falsehood is incredibly brittle. It requires constant, never-ending reinforcement from the community.
The clapping can't stop.
Exactly. The performance can never stop because the moment the clapping stops, the emptiness is right there for everyone to see.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because it's easy to listen to this and think, okay, people are padding their resumes and using silly titles at weddings, and politicians are inflating their egos. It's a quirky cultural phenomenon.
Yeah, like it's harmless.
Right.
Yeah.
With all the massive problems a recovering country faces, poverty, insecurity, rebuilding infrastructure, why does this linguistic quirk actually matter on a macro scale? But the essay makes the argument that this isn't just a side issue, it is the cool issue.
It matters immensely because small corruptions of language are never actually small. They are symptoms of larger corruptions of thought and governance.
Okay, how so?
The source makes a really profound argument. Language is the first institution. Before you can have a functioning legal system, before you can hold an election, before you can have accountability or reform, you must have words with agreed-upon objective meanings.
Facts that cannot just be dissolved into clan sentiment or personal vanity.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean for the future of a recovering nation, then?
Think about the logical progression. If a country cannot even honestly identify who is and is not a medical doctor, how will it ever manage the infinitely more complex task of identifying who is and is not corrupt?
Oh, wow.
Right. How can it determine who is actually competent to build a bridge or manage a Federal Reserve? The habit of accepting false titles belongs to the exact same cognitive family as the habit of accepting false election results, false budgets, or false promises.
So a lie about a title is basically just training wheels for bigger lies.
That's exactly it.
You get the public used to clapping for something they know in their bones isn't true, and you slowly erode their capacity to demand the truth about anything else.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the author's proposed cure is surprisingly straightforward, though it requires immense civic courage to execute.
What's the cure?
The cure is simply to use titles sparingly and verify them relentlessly. Reserve professional titles strictly for professional contexts.
So keep the doctor in the hospital where they're treating patients and the professor in the university where they're teaching students?
Exactly. A politician standing on a public platform should be judged solely as a politician. His or her academic title shouldn't serve as a bulletproof vest to protect them from scrutiny or to hide the poverty of their actual political ideas.
Makes total sense.
The media needs to stop acting as a loudspeaker for vanity, even when it's uncomfortable. And the public needs to stop treating the enforcement of standards as an act of aggression.
Right.
Asking if a person is qualified isn't a tribal insult. It is a basic defense of public truth.
There's a line from the text that I think perfectly distills this entire deep dive. The country needs fewer costumes and more character.
Such a powerful line.
It really is. There's immense, undeniable honor in being an honest farmer or a dedicated nurse or a mechanic or simply an ordinary citizen trying to rebuild their community. There is zero honor in wearing a borrowed, fake title.
And that is the ultimate tragedy of title inflation. It attempts to manufacture respect out of thin air, but in doing so, it completely destroys the very standards on which actual respect depends.
Right, because if everyone's a doctor...
When everyone is a doctor, the real doctor essentially disappears from the public consciousness, and the society is left with nothing but actors.
Wow. This has been an incredibly eye-opening journey. You know, while our sources today focus specifically on the situation in Somalia, the core lesson here is startlingly universal, whether you're looking at a recovering nation or a Fortune 500 company.
Oh, without a doubt.
A society's respect for learning, for truth, and for genuine human achievement is shown by how fiercely it defends the meaning of its words. If you let words mean anything, they eventually mean nothing. And as the essay warns, a society eventually becomes governed by the masks it tolerates.
We've spent this time examining how public performance can completely replace reality in a nation's politics and the exhausting double consciousness that creates for its citizens. But I'd like to leave you with a final thought to mull over, bringing this concept much closer to home.
Let's hear it.
Look at your own life. Where in your own professional or social circles do you quietly tolerate masks or inflated language just to avoid an awkward conversation? When you play the role of the polite wedding announcer, clapping for a reality you know isn't true, and what might be the hidden long-term cost of your polite silence.
That cognitive shortcut of trust, it only works if we protect it. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.